Exiles, talking to Try here with another Path of Exile 2 video. And I'm finally over my sickness. If we're talking in Path of Exile terms, I probably have 1 or 2 stacks of poison on me still, sore throat, a cough, headache consistently, but I am back in action to bring you all the latest Path of Exile 2 juice. And juice there has been in my absence, but not in any public-facing sphere. And we're going to get to that news in just a moment here. But first, the best way to support the channel in the lead up to Path of Exile 2 is to like this video and hit the subscribe button to build up that base so we can go hard when Path of Exile 2 releases on November 15th of this year. It's going to be tremendous, and in this video, we're going to talk about some of my plans in the lead up to the release and on the release itself. Okay, without further ado, let's get to the awesome tidbits of news straight from the Grinding Gear Games developers who are going mad. Now, I always pitch to all of you that you will get all of the Path of Exile 2 information on this channel, even the stuff that may fly under the radar, because Grinding Gear Games do make a lot of public appearances. They'll do lots of interviews. They're obviously at lots of events. They're going to be in Tokyo for the Tokyo Game Show in a few weeks now, but they are also active in the quieter places of the world where not many people lurk. I lurk there though, so you don't have to. And this goes for the Path of Exile Discord, where a few of the developers talk about the Path of Exile 2 development quite openly. And it's wonderful. They interact with the community, they give tidbits on previously known information that has evolved over time, and they also tease us to the absolute maximum. So they can't reveal anything new, but they can sure whet our senses and get us excited for that November 15th release. One of the biggest talkers on the Path of Exile 2 Discord server is Viperesque, who is a skills designer for Path of Exile 2. And over the past week or so, he's been interacting with the community and giving us some cool tidbits about the development process, some cool news, and hinting toward huge things to come in the future. So I'm going to drop all that info in front of you all today. So if you're interested into these insights on the Grinding Gear Games development process and how things have been developing and some speculation on Path of Exile 2 stuff, you want to stay for the entirety of this video. Let's dive right in. First up, a whole bunch of people in the Discord were talking about the limiting of support gems in Path of Exile 2 and the fact that you can only use one of each support gem on your characters and what that will do to builds and just diversity of skills in the game. And Viperesque chimed in and said, "We're pumping out new supports at the rate of knots." They are making sure that there are ridiculous numbers of support gems in the game because they understand with this limiting factor, there needs to be a huge diversity in supports and what these supports accomplish. We can't have the number of supports that we currently have in Path of Exile 1. We need way more. And they have to do more than just increase damage in some tiny specific way. They have to do a variety of different things. I've shared before all the support gems that we have currently seen from Path of Exile 2. They all are going to have these interesting and unique interactions. Otherwise, skill design on the player side of the game will just become boring very fast. The PoE2 developers need to have some intense freedom here and go ham on the game design portion of supports to ensure that we are captivated by the decisions we have to make. Everything isn't just going to be supported by the biggest damage increase or the gem that gives a bunch of projectiles. There are going to be a ton of other factors and facets to every skill design decision. Because remember, at maximum, at the pinnacle of endgame, sorry, not the maximum, but the minimum, assuming there aren't any other extra skills on your character, you will have 9 skill gem slots, and then each of those can have 5 support gems attached to them. That, at a minimum, will be 45 support gems on your character, and none of them can repeat. Think about that number right there. That is a super amount of support gems that you're going to be using, and all of them have to be unique, and they don't want a lot of repetition there. So there's a lot of design going in on the support gems right now. I cannot wait to see what they are cooking up behind the scenes. Next up, the community were discussing whether or not default attacks will be crucial parts of builds in Path of Exile 2, and Viperesque chipped in once more with this bit of insight, saying, Caster weapons are slightly different as well because their inherent skills aren't necessarily all about damage. So he's talking about the skills, the implicits essentially, that are granted by wielding a weapon. All weapons in Path of Exile 2 will give a default attack except caster weapons, which give a spell. The caster weapons that we currently know of are wands, staves, foci, which we've not seen a lot about recently, and then the last one are scepters, and they're summoner focused weapons there. This is very, very interesting because besides Unleash, which is one implicit that we saw on a staff during the ExileCon 2023 demonstration of Path of Exile 2, we haven't seen many skills that aren't about damage. We've seen stuff like Fireball, which obviously is all about damage. I'm very curious to see what other types of implicit skills these caster weapons will be granting us at higher levels of endgame. And I do believe the design is still based around the fact that different weapon base types will grant different implicits. So that, in addition to the weapons dealing more base damage and the like and having different requirements, is also a part of the scaling in Path of Exile 2. But it isn't necessarily a power scaling, it's more so a diversity scaling. Because you might still want to use that staff that grants a fireball at max level if your build revolves around that, or you'll want that staff that is usable at level 70 that has that really cool defensive skill that is integral to your build. He then later added, and the more utility-focused ones, caster weapons, are more likely to be attractive to you even in the later game. Whereas if you don't need to basic attack, then that's that for martial weapons. The community then they didn't pester him, but they were just interested, could we make builds that are based on default weapon attacks? Viperesque responded saying, it wouldn't even be that hard. I'd compare it to making a good, in quotations, build with heavy strike or split arrow in PoE 1. Obviously suboptimal, but not that, in italics, suboptimal. Interesting stuff. I love to hear that. This is essentially the one button builds in Path of Exile 2. And it's good that this will exist in some form, because I was talking to my dad the other day about playing Path of Exile 2. He's interested in giving it a go, but he wants to be able to make something simple. Not something like Righteous Fire where, there are a lot of mechanics interacting there, and as long as you follow the build guide, you're good to go. No, he just wants something that he can build himself with ease that is 1 or 2 buttons. And the fact that default weapon attacks, just swinging your sword, bonking, is going to be an option in the game is great. It's not going to be optimal, but it will be viable. That's vital. You can have something in the game that isn't the meta, but as long as it's viable and you'll be able to complete a lot of content with it, I think that's just a good thing, a net positive. Really quick one here. Fair Shadow was asking, would be very interesting to know how much each beta changes, but due to the NDA, I imagine we won't be able to know. Oi, Viper, and Viperesque responded, fair amount of balance and polish differences. That's all. Just some polish, some balance changes, nothing else that we can be told about. We don't know if there's different content between beta 1 and beta 2, and we don't know if there's going to be a beta 3, but right now, beta 1, beta 2, they are over. The third beta, if it happens, probably will start this week or a little sooner. Then we have this little tidbit from Viper about crossbow skills. He says, I'll also note that the other crossbow skills have barrage as their default multi-projectile behavior, still figuring out how to best communicate that, which makes additional projectiles on them pretty good. This means that crossbow skills will act like barrages do in Path of Exile 1, where they all go onto a single target, not a single target, but in a singular area, so it makes them easier to aim. That's very interesting because some skills in Path of Exile will spread out with multi-proj. It's interesting to see how they're going to have to explain that between a bow skill and a crossbow skill. Then we have some very technical information that is still interesting to hear nonetheless. People who are very techie, let me know in the comments what this is comparable to. Someone in the Discord asked, is the download size for PoE2 really 100 gigabytes? And Viperesque says, that's an estimate. We don't know the exact size yet, but it will be in that ballpark, yes. At the end of the day, there's only so much that 100 plus different areas and 500 plus monsters worth of art can be compressed and whittled down. For reference, the raw size of Path of Exile 2's art assets is 1.8 terabytes. Now, I just did a look at some games on my computer, and the one, of course, that we can compare Path of Exile to is Path of Exile 1, which requires 40 gigabytes of available space. So that is a 60 gigabyte difference that is predicted between PoE1 and PoE2. That is wild. Now we have some new / reinforced information about Path of Exile 2 Ascendancies, plus a wild hint from Viperesque about an upcoming Ascendancy. Let's read this chain right here. They were talking about whether or not rapiers will be in the game or just spears, and Viperesque said no rapiers currently. And then somebody followed up and said, I don't know, kind of hoping for a pirate-themed Ascendancy for the Shadow. Viperesque responds and says, if there was a pirate-themed Ascendancy, it couldn't have anything to do with rapiers anyway. We're avoiding tying Ascendancies to specific weapon types. Then Viperesque follows up and says, calling out specific damage types on Ascendancies is fine. So what does that mean here? I'm just going to go wild and speculate a little bit, and I'm going to talk about my favorite archetype that has never been in a Path of Exile game before, at least in a playable state, and that is shapeshifting. Shapeshifting in Path of Exile 2 is kind of a specific type of weapon, right? You get your own set of passive skill points to use alongside it, just like a weapon swap. It acts as an extra weapon swap. At least that's how it worked in 2023 when it was showcased by Jonathan at Gamescom. I'm wondering if that means that there can't be an ascendancy that is specifically tied back to shapeshifting because it technically is a weapon. It's very interesting to think about. I cannot fathom there not being a shape-shifting specific ascendancy in Path of Exile 2. And the fact that Viperesque talked a little bit more about ascendancies on September 12th during this exchange right here makes me think that I just need to put all of my preconceived notions away and put all of my faith in grinding gear games. User Genuine Believer says, I need to see how far they're willing to go into the depths of insanity or if they'll stay sane regarding ascendancies. Then Omega Cybers says, yes. Genuine Believer then says, I'm just hoping each class pair has at least one ascendancy that basically leaps across the tree thematically like a sword sorceress or a minion using Duelisk. And then Viperesque responds, there's one particular thing that I really wish I could share a screenshot of right now. Alas. And then Maj says, Viper UT's not fair, to be honest. I am so excited for November 15th. So we know that we're very unlikely to get all the Ascendancy classes for the 8 supposed classes that we will be playing in Path of Exile 2's early access on release, but we will probably be getting at least one Ascendancy for each. That is more than enough for me. I think they've been cooking on these for a very long time. We've only heard them talk about ascendancies a handful of times, including with my first interview with Jonathan Rogers when he was talking about a sorceress ascendancy that was absolutely busted and he really wanted to get it into the core game. And the fact that the leaked ascendancy names, the Arcane Archer, the Shaman, and the Earthshaker aren't final names, but they are definitely the ideas that they're going for those related classes. I am just so excited to see what they have cooking. I know that I've been doing a lot of collabs with Silver XYZ. He also has been continuing his Ascendancy series over on his channel. So if you are as hungry as I am for Path of Exile 2 Ascendancies, I highly recommend going over to that channel and giving those videos a watch. They are so interesting, and I think that they are pretty darn close to how wild grinding your games is going to go when they design their own ascendancies for Path of Exile 2. We've got, 61 days to go before we definitely get our hands on those. Whew, it is so exciting. Now we have 2 philosophical discussions right here from Viperesque on game design. This first one arose when people were talking about the passive skill tree and how Path of Exile 1 causes so many players to bounce because of the complexity and just how it's scary to players. And Viperesque came in with the most well-written defense of Path of Exile I've seen in quite some time. So I'm going to read it in its entirety right here. It's not that long. I'm kind of building it up to be long. It's not that long. So here we go. There are at least 2 very different types of new player experience being conflated here. 1, oh god, this game is so complicated, I want something simpler. And 2, oh God, I'm so overwhelmed and don't understand what to do. Category 1 are players who won't like PoE, and that's fine. Category 2 often do like the game once they get into it. They just aren't provided with the tools to get into it. We'd very much like to improve the onboarding for the sake of those Category 2 players. This is a succinct and beautiful explanation of how they are streamlining Path of Exile 2's tutorialization, alongside some of the graphical changes that are modernizing the game and the improvements to combat. I think the tutorialization of Path of Exile 2's systems are going to be one of the biggest factors in its success. The way that the skills are being explained with videos, and they're just going to have more direct descriptions, and the fact that you'll be able to see what each passive point does before you select it, and the fact that you'll be able to compare stats between items and how the new item stats will affect all the skills in your character, and all these other countless system changes that PoE 2 is undergoing to help improve the new player onboarding experience. This is just going to turn Path of Exile 2's opening into such a strong experience, and it's going to build it up and allow players to progress from Act 1 to Act 6 and beyond and become hooked on the game. Path of Exile 1's player numbers are impressive. They just hit an all-time peak in Settlers of Calgary with over 350,000 concurrent players across platforms. That is phenomenal, but it would be so much higher if Path of Exile 1 had a terrific new player onboarding system. And I think Path of Exile 2 will have that system in place, and it will smash Path of Exile 1 in terms of the number of players retained. And that is only a good thing for everyone. More players playing our game, the game that we love to play, is only going to help the game. It's going to help it grow. It's going to fund grinding gear games for more future expansions, more future games. I am just so excited. Plus, for all those people you've tried to introduce to Path of Exile in the past and they don't like being handheld by you and they end up bouncing from the game, all my friends are very excited to play Path of Exile 2. And I've pitched the game, and the game has pitched itself in a way that is really opening themselves up to trying the Path of Exile franchise once more. And that's, like I said, only a good thing. And then a little bit of discussion on the passive skill tree. So a few videos ago, I did showcase the blank Path of Exile 2 passive skill tree. No node information and the like on it, just the general layout, the vibe that grinding your games is going for with the style of the clusters and how large it is and all that good stuff. Well, some people were wondering why they just can't release the full passive skill tree and all the different stats on each node, the keystones, and the like. And Viperesque explained why not very succinctly to some individuals on the Discord. Viperesque said, mostly for the same reason showing anything unfinished can be risky. Maps and Ascendancies. He didn't say that, I added that. It sets expectations, no matter how clear it's made that something is unfinished and subject to change. As soon as it's shown off, people will start getting attached to parts of it. That's just setting them up for disappointment when things inevitably change. This goes triple for something that invites theory crafting as much as the passive tree does. He is 100% right here, and he's actually touching on a video that I will be releasing later this week, discussing how grinding your games turned around the perception of Path of Exile 2 after, and I'm going to use a big word here, the disastrous showcase of Path of Exile 2 at ExileCon 2023. People were shocked at the split out from Path of Exile 1. People were just floored, and not in a good way, I think, in a lot of scenarios. And the more I become enveloped in the community and talking to the people who experienced Path of Exile 2 at ExileCon, the more I realize grinding gear games has completely turned around the perception and the excitement levels for this game in the past year. Hype levels are off the charts now, and that is completely different from the place we were in July 2023. I hope you enjoyed all that insightful information from Viperesque. He is a very insightful and communicative individual from GGG's development team, and I absolutely love talking to him and reading what he has to say about Path of Exile 2 and game design in general. That was it for today, though. Now I want to get into just a few announcements and talking about plans for the channel. I swear it's only going to be about a minute. Please don't click off, just listen for a few seconds more. I am going to start streaming again 2 days a week leading up to the release of Path of Exile 2's early access. The plan is to stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Sorry, just had an absolute coughing fit there. I told you I still have 1 or 2 poison stacks on me. Anyways, the plan is to talk about Path of Exile 2, play some Path of Exile, maybe some other games. I think I'll be playing the Basket of Hatred just so I can compare the Basket of Hatred campaign to Path of Exile 2's campaign when it launches. Those streams are going to be super fun. We have a lot of super talkative members of the community. You can see for yourself on our Discord channel if you'd like to join it. I'll put the link in the description below. Those streams are always super fun times. Other than that, I will be covering absolutely everything Path of Exile 2 related, like I said before. So if you want to see mostly positive coverage of the game from a hyped up Exile, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, share it with your friends, because this is where you're going to get all the Path of Exile 2 juice as fast and straight as possible. I think that's all for today. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, make sure you go and watch my part 2 of Path of Exile's most famous and infamous players. It's a pretty fun video when I talk about some people that I have quite a bit of respect for. It's probably on your screen right now. Anyways, that's all for this video. See you in the next one. Talkative Exiles.